Guys who got told no during a failed marriage proposal. What happened afterwards? Not me, but a proposal I saw. I was vacationing in Las Vegas back in 2006 with my then family. We took in a show a day on the trip. The day after Christmas, we saw a magic show. About halfway through the performance, the magician had a young woman from the audience come up and assist with some trick. They did the meet and greet with her. She was on a vacation with her boyfriend's family and blah blah. The magician does his thing, and then suddenly the boyfriend appears out of some box that was deceptively empty just a second ago. The boyfriend goes down on his knee, out comes the ring, and he goes into his declarations of love and affection and rehash the last few years. It was a sweet proposal. She smiles and clasps her hands in front of her face and says, "Absolutely nothing." We in the audience are all silent and waiting to So we all cheered for the happy couple. What else was he going to do? They had great seats at a table, center stage and down in the front, where we could see the happy couple and family. The poor girl sat by herself and the dude huddled with his parents at the other side. I don't think they talked at all for the rest of the show. A proposal, a pause, and a whole lot of awkwardness. Classic. Story 2. I got everything ready and she said, "No, at least not right now." And it sort of muted the rest of the weekend. Several people heard I was going to ask and congratulated me next week. It was surreal informing them she said no. It should have been a wake-up call to just end it there, but neither of us wanted to. We were her first everything. We had a lot of history. I guess I thought it would just work out, but her reservations on being married at the time never really went away. I admitted that both of us wanted exclusive things. Our lives were headed in opposite directions, and compromise just meant someone else was going to be resentful. When we started dating, both of us really helped each other out in a lot of areas and through some really challenging times. But we learned later on that things that were great then may not be great now. Both of us were good people, but some things just have a lifespan. We got what we needed, and it was time for the next phase of our lives, alone. A huge part of successful marriages requires compromise in small issues, but some issues have no compromise. It's okay to fight for things if there's a way that both of you can get what you want, and there's no shame in letting things go if there's nothing more that can be done. We broke up 7 or so months later. Restarting life for what was the second time for me was tough, because I was also going through a lot of other things and she wasn't able to be there anymore. The same thing was happening on her end, so it just kinda ended there. We both dated other people and got married to others eventually. So in the super long term, it was all okay. Story 3. Not a guy, but a girl. I asked my boyfriend to marry me. I didn't do a whole scene about it. We were talking and I said that I wanted to get married and I felt ready for it, and he just said no. I was mad. He'd never mentioned this and we've talked about it before. All he had ever said was that he didn't want it because it was expensive and didn't want a big party, and so, in my understanding, we would get married at the courthouse and have a small gathering with family and close friends. Then I found out he didn't want to get married because his parents had a divorce and he didn't want to go through that. It took a while to unravel all his issues with marriage. At a certain point, I said I'm not going to wait around with a guy that doesn't want to get married. I'd always been very clear about wanting to get married. He disagreed and said I've also mentioned that I didn't want a big wedding. I'm like, what? We realized we were both talking about different things. He'd put together marriage and the wedding and it wasn't. Still, obviously, it wasn't solved right then and there. I gave him some time to think. After like a month, I came back to the subject and he asked me why I wanted to get married. And I talked about all the laws that protect the couple in the eventuality of disease and death, and owning property, and security if we had children, etc. He suddenly just said, "Oh, I didn't know about that." Then yeah, we'll get married then. We've been happily married for 5 years. Almost every day he says he's so happy being married to me and that his wedding day was one of the happiest of his life. Story 4. Not my story, but told from our jeweler when we were buying our wedding bands. So a guy comes in to buy an engagement ring. The jeweler sits down with him to talk about design, cost, and what have you. Our jeweler always asks people about how they're going to propose. She likes to share in the excitement. The guy brags about how he's going to propose to his girlfriend at a ball game, on a big screen in front of the entire stadium while his favorite team plays. As the guy is speaking, our jeweler notices that everything is centered around the guy. From the ring to the proposal, no mention of what his girlfriend likes. Our jeweler gets a bad feeling, but she sells him the ring. Not long after, the guy comes back in with a ring. The girlfriend said no, which really didn't surprise the jeweler. Story 5. Not my own experience, but I was in the restaurant when a failed proposal happened. Somehow the guy was able to get the families involved in this fancy dinner without the girl's knowledge as to what was going to happen. He orders their drinks, where he had the ring cleaned and then placed at the bottom of her pina colada drink. She gets up and goes to the bathroom. And that's when some of her family moved in close with their cameras or phones ready for the proposal. She comes back and the drinks are brought. She refuses to drink, much to his dismay, but doesn't get the hint. She doesn't want it. You should have your drink. It's really good. She again says no. This goes on, back and forth. Finally, she says no and is disturbed by his pushy behavior. I hear this from my table. I can't marry someone who won't respect my boundaries. She gets up and walks out of the restaurant. The guy sits there, waiting for her to cool off. She doesn't come back in, so he fishes out his ring and has their drinks taken away. She comes back in near the end and he shows her the ring and tells her it was in the drink. And she slaps him and says no. This time, she is angry and leaves. Everyone packs up and heads to pay. He just sits there by himself. I want to get up and say something, but my date was ready to go home. Story 6. Not the guy here, but the naysayer. He just finished a 1,000-mile solo cycling tour, and I met him at the finish. I was so caught up in his achievement that I did not see the proposal coming, and I was shocked. So I told him right there, I love you, but I can't give you an answer right now. Of course, there were tears, and we both called family members and then continued on our planned holiday. We had such a good time on our holidays and were able to enjoy each other's company like normal. So I figured that if we can handle this bump in the road this well, we were a great team. And at the end of the holiday, I told him I would love to marry him. That was 7 years ago, and I haven't regretted my decision for a second. I simply needed time to process a life-changing choice, and my partner was mature enough to understand this. Story 7. Not a guy, but I set things up to be perfect. The two of us totally alone at sunset on the Sicilian beach, and he said no out of pure shock. He'd always expected that it would be him asking me, not the other way around. His brain kind of caught up with what was going on, and he was horrified at himself for just saying no like that. He told me, of course, he wanted to marry me, and he hadn't meant no as in he didn't want to marry me. It was more like, no way, did you just ask me that? But it came out wrong. We both agreed that this wasn't the proposal we both want to remember forever, so we do it again properly some other time. 9 months later, he proposed to me on my birthday in one of my favorite spots. To his relief, I didn't say no. And we've now been married 10 years. Story 8. When we first started dating, he was all excited about me as the girlfriend, showed me off, and would make claims that I was his future wife. Almost 2 years into our relationship, and I'm talking to him about what our next steps are in the relationship. And without hesitation, he claims that it would be marriage. He got all excited about it and assured me that I was the love of his life. A month goes by, and he takes me out to a really expensive restaurant, and I mean really expensive, by the beach at sunset. Live violins playing in the room, showers me with flowers, champagne, and dessert. And I thought for sure he was going to pop the question. Turns out he was going to break up with me and was going to wait until after intimacy to tell me. The only reason why he told me is that we got back to his place and he wanted to go to bed and have intimacy. So as I was getting ready, I admitted that it was a fantastic date and I thought he was going to propose. We were having such a great time. That's when he confessed his plan. Turns out that after our conversation a month back, he gave it more thought and realized that he wasn't ready to get married. He wanted to treat me to a nice night out and some great intimacy and then break it off in the morning because he thought I was a great girlfriend to him. We got along great, had the same values, philosophy, and interests, but he didn't want to marry me. He couldn't understand why I left immediately following at 1 a.m. 35 days later, he married a Thai woman that he met on the internet and paid for her. He brought her over to the US and she got pregnant really fast. Not even 3 months later, he was already making pregnancy announcements. She lasted 4 years. Gave him 2 more kids, got her green card, and moved out. He hunted me down to find me on social media, confessed his life after me, and was crying that his ex-wife took him for everything he had. He was so apologetic and wanted to know if it was too late, and said he was kicking himself that he should have stayed with me. He made claims that he got intrigued with the mail-order bride thing and thought it would be so cool. She was 19. He was 38. And she made a lot of promises and she didn't keep one of them. She resisted everything she promised him in the relationship and they had constant fights. He realized that she only used him for citizenship and money. Shocking. I, of course, was in a committed relationship, but I have no idea what he would think after 5 years I would be ready and waiting for him to come back to me. Sort of felt insulted that he thought that of me. I think once he saw my life online and found out more in the shared messages that I became exactly who I wanted to become. and his life would have been more enhanced and more simple if we would have stayed together. Even if we would have divorced and we would have left with exactly what we had and earned, we were both equally financially the same with a few areas of exception. His house was worth more than mine at the time, and I believe he had a bigger 401k portfolio than I did. That was about 6K, so we're real close. He no longer has the house for his retirement as he had to split that in half with her too. Karma served cold, with a side of regret. Story 9. I'm not a man, but I proposed to my girlfriend at the time. To be honest, there were a lot of complicating factors in our relationship, but regardless, I was head over heels in love with her and wanted to marry her. She said no. Our relationship continued for about a year, me hoping that she would come around wanting to marry me. We had too many conversations about the seriousness of our relationship, and each time she would say, "Why can't you just get over it?" Meaning me asking her to marry me. I eventually ended it when I finally realized that she just didn't love me the way I did her, and that I deserved better. Unfortunately, that took longer than should have to realize, but I'm one that if things end between us, then it's fully over. I didn't want to do it prematurely. Everything worked out well, though. My now husband asked me to marry him, and we've been happy for almost 10 years now. Story 10. My wife said yes, but I was still waiting for the other shoe to drop until the wedding day. She had rejected 2 men before me on marriage proposals and had told me she was a bit of a commitment phobe. Her matron of honor slept over the night before the wedding and slept by the front door to make sure my wife didn't leave during the night, and if she did, to call me and let me know what happened so I could enact my backup plan. I had a backup plan in case she pulled a runner at the ceremony. She almost didn't go in the day of. I was prepared just in case. Then she showed up, we got married, and just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. She still breaks out in hives and has many freakouts when she realizes how long we've been together, despite having 2 kids, a house, mortgage, etc. For those of you guys dealing with commitment phobes, tell them what you've got planned. I let my wife know months ahead of time that I was planning on proposing and gained insights that if I were going to do it, that it had to be a certain way. Never propose in public unless your girlfriend is into that. Also, make sure that if you are going to propose, she's aware and that you know with certainty that's what she wants. Communicate, people. It isn't that hard. Story 11. When I was 21, I got involved with one of my college teachers who was significantly older than me. Somehow it kind of worked out. We were together almost 10 years. We had the whole house and dog thing worked out, but from about 5 years into it, we started taking separate holidays because neither of us were particularly interested in what the other wanted to do. One day I went to his sister's place to pick him up from his most recent trip to Thailand. We lived in a regional city and his sister lived closest to the nearest international airport. So he calls me to the guest bedroom where he's been going through all his luggage and is surrounded by dirty holiday clothes and cheap trinkets. He pulls out a small glitter bag and hands it to me, saying, "This is for you. It's an engagement ring. Will you marry me?" I was shocked and panicked and said okay. Then I went out to the lounge room and called my best friend. She said it's okay to go back and say no, so I did. I went back in there and explained that I didn't want to get married. He just said okay and asked me not to tell anyone he'd asked. The next day, at the beginning of the 4-hour drive home, he admitted that he accidentally got an extra service the previous time he was in Thailand the year before. I was furious with him for essentially lying by omission for the whole previous year, especially when we had maybe had intimacy once in that whole period. I broke up with him then and there and then had the most awkward 4-hour drive to continue through. I got the last laugh, though. I ended up finding and marrying a wonderful man who happens to be a massage therapist. So now I get all the extra service and the irony is not lost on me. Sometimes the best revenge is a happy ending. Story 12. I'd been best friends for years and dating for a while after that, and I started asking her what she would think of marrying me. She always would say something like she would love it or that she can't think of anything better. I finally decided to talk to her mom about it and she said she approved. I asked her a few months later and she was mad. She told me her mom told her I spoke with her about it and that I was an idiot for thinking she would want to get married after I'd heard for a while about how messed up her parents' marriage and divorce were. I was completely blindsided. I'd prepared a romantic day together, ending at a really nice restaurant where I could privately propose to her. When I asked her why she told me so many times that she wanted to get married, she thought it was part of some role-playing or something. I still don't know what that means. Apparently, I should have known she was absolutely against marriage just because her parents' marriage was terrible. Story 13. My ex proposed to me at a reunion show I played with a band I used to be in. We hadn't been together for like 8 months and had a really bad 2020 breakup. He was really into QAnon at the time. He managed to get a bunch of my family and his family to the show, which wasn't unusual, so I didn't think much about it. About 3 songs into our 30-minute set, he bought a round of tequila shots for the band, also not unusual, and delivered mine to me last. It had a ring in it, and he asked me to marry him while I was on stage in front of everyone there, including my boyfriend, now husband. All I said was, "I'm not doing this with you right now." Downed the shot in another one, left the ring, and was then forced to fumble through the rest of that show without being able to get that stunt out of my head. Worst show I've ever played by far, and I was so mad that he did that to me. Seemed like a mind-crazed power play, and I was so angry. The real kicker, too, was the theme of the whole show was essentially take back the night kind of vibes to create awareness about how women don't feel safe at bars or music venues because of how some men behave. The all-female band was utterly unsympathetic, and I left immediately. Haven't spoken to them since, and completely dropped out of the scene after that. Super messed up all around. Story 14. I was told no during a successful marriage proposal. Does that count? We had just finished something and we were relaxing in bed with each other, and while it wasn't the big moment that I was thinking of, it just felt right. Me. Hey, I love you and I know you love me. Would you marry me? Her. Giggle. No. Now, normally you'd think this was a bad thing, a heartbreaking moment or a major miscommunication in relationship readiness, but really it was basically an inside joke. See, when we first were dating, she came over to my place one night after work. It was extremely late, like 2 or so, and I didn't want her to have to drive home. So I offered her my bed and grabbed a thin blanket and laid down on the floor so we could keep talking until we both fell asleep. I was freezing on the floor, and when she woke up, she told me to get into the bed and cuddle with her for warmth. This is a proposition that I could not refuse and climbed into bed. As we're lying there talking and flirting, I looked into her eyes and asked, "Hey, can I kiss you?" And she giggled and said, "No." I accepted that and went back to flirting or talking. Later on, she said I could kiss her, and we did. When I asked her why she said no originally, she told me that I was the first guy who had even bothered to ask her consent to kiss her, and she wanted to say no to see if I was serious about listening to her. So, looping back to the marriage proposal, it was basically a direct reference to that initial moment. She then laughed again and said yes. Story 15. My mom, who is a massive floozy, cheated on my Christian father with my sister's biological dad. Of course, she wanted termination to remove me from inconvenience. My father fought her out of it. Trailer park life drama BS. My mom dumped my dad on the day she discovered she was 2 months pregnant with my half-sister with this other man. Needless to say, that man was horrible to all of us. This man was a user, and my mom moved in his place. My sister and I got mistreated. My mother got roughened. It was a scary formative year for me. This man was all smiley and fake in front of everyone, but a monster in private. Many terrorizing moments led my mother to finally leave him for good, only after a confrontation from my father. My father mentioned to me that before I turned 6, I begged him to stop this man, and when I wasn't satisfied with his answer, I went to my grandfather with a request to remove this man from Earth. That spooked my dad and grandfather. Why would a kid desire such a thing? My dad decided to address this with my mother directly one afternoon. It's a great thing that he did, because it turned gears in my mother's head. I remember one night vividly when my mom sneaks into my sister's shared bedroom around midnight. She told me to be quiet and pack up. We fled out of his mobile home to her mother's farmhouse, my nana's, with a handful of suitcases and duffels. Easily one of the most relieved feelings I've ever felt. Despite everything, my mother turned her life around and became extra careful. She dated a good man for 15 years before she accepted his proposal. She turned him down 5 times before accepting his proposal to have a wedding on 7/7/7. And they're still together in 2024. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 16. Not failed. My wife sniffed out my first attempt at a proposal, so I postponed it for almost a year. When she lost all hope and was ready to give up, I put my second proposal plan in motion. She worked at a chocolate shop. It was the day before Easter, so the place was packed. I sat at one end of the shopping plaza looking for a dude heading that way. The second guy I asked was game to help me out. The plan was to have him go into the shop and ask to have a box of chocolates made with a ring in the middle after it needed to be delivered. My girlfriend, or wife, actually helped put it together. At the same time, I called the store informing a coworker that my girlfriend needed to be the one to deliver it to the pottery shop next door. I walked into the shop and said I was surprising someone. Could I sit in the corner for a few minutes? A few minutes later, my girlfriend walks in wearing bunny ears, looking for a guy in a white shirt. When she saw me, she was like, "What are you doing here?" Super confused. She went back to asking where the guy in the white shirt was. I stood up and stated, "The box is for you." Still confused, she said no. It's the guy in the white shirt's box. I said, "No, open it. It's for you." It still didn't register completely. I walked over, grabbed the box, and pulled out the ring and proposed properly. She said yes. It was funny. The pottery shop was a popular day place where you paint pottery and drink wine, so the place had about a dozen people. All the girls exploded when she said yes. All the dudes gave me the stink eye. When she walked back into her work, I guess everyone had stopped working when she left and was waiting at the door screaming and cheering as she walked in. I was totally fine with it, but I got left outside in the commotion. My job is over. The true hero of the story? The guy in the white shirt, who played his part flawlessly. Story 17. After my biogramps, terrible dude, finally got kicked out by my grandma, a few years later after being fully committed to bringing up my dad and aunt and keeping them fed somehow, she finally led a handyman in her life with his very own struggles. Grew up with 7 siblings, most of them in jail. It was the best of them, with just a gambling and drinking habit. She got him through rehab, which was rare in the late 70s. He let her have full control over his finances. They did not even live together at the point. When he finally had his stuff together and moved in a few years into their relationship, he proposed to her, but not in a romantic way. Her doing jobs left and right wherever she could make some money and taking care of the kids. She had no savings or anything prepared for rent in any sort. He already helped with utility bills. At least she got the house from my gramps attested to her by court, who was by then a wealthy lawyer but otherwise wouldn't give her a penny. Maybe buy the kid some clothes at times. He did love her, but he could never find the words for it as he did not experience love for the first 35 years of his life, which were miserable. So he proposed to her, calling it securing her, saving taxes, less paperwork, etc. She said she's not going to accept a proposal under these aspects. It took him almost 20 years to say to her he loved her. Proposed again, with a romantic dinner and everything set up. Invited my dad and aunt back. Aunt was living out of country at the time. Before he could finish his sentence, Grandma said yes. They married after 22 years of being together, through good and hard times, and were married for 20 more years until he sadly passed away to lung cancer. His third 30 years of smoking a pack a day and working with asbestos is not good for your lungs. She's almost 90 now, and still misses him every day. My schmuck of a grandpa is still alive at the same age. Not to say he rather deserved it, but Story 18. Not a marriage proposal, but a do you want to get out proposal. She and I were BFFs. We were always doing things together and having a great time. I figure, why not take it to the next step and call each other boyfriend and girlfriend? By the way, she would have been the first black woman I dated. She said no. She explained, "You're a great guy, and I have a lot of fun with you, but look, you're a white Jewish guy and I'm a black woman. It would never work out." I accepted that. We stayed friends because I figure hanging out with her as friends was much better than not hanging out with her at all. A couple of weeks after I asked her, I got a call from her. "Guess what? I got a boyfriend." "Oh, that's nice." She then described him as a white Jewish guy. What happened afterwards was I moved across the country. Not for her, but because I got a great job offer. I hadn't heard from her since. Story 19. This was me. She broke up with me soon afterward because if marriage was what I wanted, then she felt like she was holding me back, and that I was better off finding someone who I wouldn't have to wait around for. I was completely devastated at the time. But she was right in retrospect, and I did it in the most idiotic way possible too. Though I really meant it. We'd only been together a couple of years and I was 21 and she was 19. Hadn't even discussed it with her first. We both went on to have a few serious relationships after that, but stayed friends. Then about 6 years after the fact, we ended up reconnecting, romantically. It's been another 4 years since then, and I'm extremely grateful every day. Story 20. I'd been dating this girl for 3 years. Things were going great. We clicked on many levels. She made me laugh. I made her laugh. We were very comfortable together. Everything just felt so right. I got a ring. Somehow got her ring size without her suspecting anything. Asked her father for his blessing. I wanted things to be a surprise. I had things set up and was going to propose in my apartment so it wasn't public or embarrassing for her, because I knew she would not like that. She, being nerdy like me, had mentioned that she liked the homunculus, a spatial representation of the real estate that certain body parts occupy in your brain in relationship to other parts. For example, the sensory homunculus has giant hands or lips or tongue compared to their proportional real size. So knowing that, I got a homunculus sculpture off Etsy. I got rose petals, candles, and put the ring in the homunculus statue's oversized hands. Setting the mood. I asked her to come over without raising any suspicions. She comes over, lights are dimmed. She rounds the corner from the front door with me on one knee. The candlelight, the ring, the homunculus. I thought to myself, this is perfect. Well, I barely got the question out before she noped it out of there like a bat out of hell. Crushing, to say the least. I think she said no, but honestly, she got out the door so fast she might have not actually said anything. Stunned is putting it lightly. The next 48 hours was a maelstrom of emotion, to say the least. I tried to reach out. She said she needed time to sort things out and to not to try to get in touch with her before she could. I was pretty convinced it was over. Finally, she calls. Says I've thought things through and I accept. I have the homunculus on her mantle now and I'm just waiting for one of our kids to ask about it. Well, let me tell you about that. Story 21. Well, this isn't exactly a no, but I am a non-straight dude. I dated someone for 6 years, asked him to marry me. He said yes. 3 days later, he cheated on me with my two best friends at the same time. I broke emotionally. I did not see it coming. I was completely happy. He told me it was because I was too controlling. I asked why, and he said it was because I always chose where we ate or what we watched on Netflix. I won't get into it now, but I disagree with these statements for a lot of reasons. Namely, he never made a suggestion for either, and I always asked what he wanted first, to which he said, I don't care. I was not okay. I just lost 3 of my closest friends. I told him that I wanted to make it work. He wanted me to be friends with these guys. I did not want to be friends with these people anymore. I tried. It was horrible. Finally, he agreed to cut them out. We spent a few months getting our house ready to sell. We sold and moved to the other side of town so we didn't run to these people. 3 days after I emptied my bank account and we moved into our new house, he told me that he wanted to be in a throuple or something with these people and broke up with me. I told him I lacked the energy to put into trying to keep him anymore, so I told him to go crazy. I made him buy me out of my half of the house. He did. I moved downtown 5 years ago and have not seen any of them since. The non-straight community in Columbus, Ohio being small, I hear things here and there. Namely, they all talk about how much of a trash I am, and I just let people say it. I don't really care. Eventually, I might move to another city, but I like it here. But I certainly won't find another boyfriend here. Story 22. I proposed to a girl beside a spring at the end of a nature trail. She said no, and things got awkward. It stayed awkward for about 1.5 miles since that was how long the walk down to the spring was. What made it worse was the fact that walking down to the spring was all downhill. Walking back was all uphill. Then, after arriving back at the car, all hot and sweaty, we had to continue fighting the awkwardness and avoiding the subject all the way back to the city. A 40-mile drive and winding 2-lane highways frequented by farmers driving combines and hay trucks. It was probably the most uncomfortable both of us have ever been. We're both fine now, though. She married a guy who cheated on her, then married another guy who came out as not straight 2 years into their marriage. Then married a third guy who ended up going to prison for stealing catalytic converters. Me, I ended up marrying a woman I didn't love. Had a kid. Ended up falling in love with her only for her to divorce me after her only sister passed without warning. She wanted a fresh start and left me. We were together for 7 years and married for 5. I've never loved and hated someone so much in my life, and what's worse, my daughter asked me to remain civil with her mom and didn't want me to fight with her. Evidently, she didn't ask the same thing of her mom since she treats me awful. Fortunately, our daughter is in college now, so I don't have to talk to my ex anymore. The single life is bliss. Story 23. I'm the girl on the other end, but it's a half no. But we were together 1.5 years at this point and decided to take a day trip to the city I really like in my home state. All day I kept making the joke of, you better not propose to me today, because I seriously thought there was no way it would happen. After dinner, we were walking around the village along the river, talking about how great the day was and how we enjoyed each other so much. Later, we were standing in front of this little waterfall during the sunset. I heard the gravel shuffle behind me and I said, I swear to God, you better not be proposing right now. And when I turned, he was down on one knee and quickly trying to fake tie his already tied shoe. I later found out he absolutely was trying to propose all day and later asked me back at home. We've been married 5 years and we're still going strong. Don't make jokes like that, I guess. Lol. Story 24. Not necessarily a marriage proposal gone wrong, but I'd been dating a girl for a couple years and she wasn't into the whole wedding thing, so we made plans to just elope. We told our parents the plan and everything was a go. We'd go on vacation and come back married. Mind you, we had a perfect relationship. We get to our destination, find the courthouse, park, and she turns to me and says, I'm sorry, I can't marry you. No explanation, no reasoning, just that she can't. We continue with the vacation and honestly, we just pretended like it never happened. We got back home and things got weird. Intimacy stopped first. Then she would leave every weekend and not want to spend time with me. Fast forward 6 months.
I'm sleeping on the couch and she locks herself in the bedroom. I go to work. I come home and it's like she never lived there. Everything that was hers was gone. No note, no call, blocked and everything. Never heard from her again. Ran into her dad a year or so later and found out she was married. I still wonder what happened. Story 25. I proposed to her. She pity-partied. I repeated myself with a staunch demeanor of outpouring love in the face of fears and worries. She pity-partied. I relentlessly spoke my soul out, proposing again, and shared all the love and faith I had in our connection and of our hearts. She pity-partied. I proposed one last time with determination and hope with all that I had. She said, "Stop saying that," in the exact intonation of the six-fingered man from The Princess Bride, which, legitimately, in the moment, some part of my head started to pass out laughing about it, whilst the rest of me was grieving with what I had to do. I told her directly that if she truly didn't see a future of marriage due to her fears and self-doubts, then I loved her enough to let her go. She tried to backpedal and say we could make it work, but I felt how she loved being loved by me, but didn't want to be loved by me. I broke things off there and then. She was crying. I was sad, but resolute. I offered to make myself the bad guy in some way, but she said that it wasn't like me and wouldn't be true either way. We went our separate ways and stayed somewhat friends. She was going to our university and I was working away from school for a time. I came back after some major ups and downs and returned back to school in a really good place. She struggled with a lot of her baggage. I stayed in contact. I was really supportive of her and her growth. I continued to date others and life went on. Years later, she reached out and apologized about how she treated me and our connection. I accepted it as best I could, but it was a love lost and I'd moved forward. Story 26. Not me, but my dad and mom. They were both from the forgotten generation, the one that came right before the boomers. Anyway, in their younger years, my mom used to work for a drive-in diner, and my dad worked at the local steel mills. This was when they were about 19 to 20 years old. My dad always had a crush on my mom back then, and they hung out a lot at the drive-in. Anyway, one day my dad asked her to marry him, and my mom scoffed and said, "Are you kidding? No way." I was told my dad said, "All right, I won't ask you again." After a couple of years, the place closed down and they hadn't seen each other for a very long time. Something like 15 years had passed. And one day, my mom was babysitting a group of kids for a friend and they went to McDonald's where my dad ran into her. At first, he thought the kids were hers. My mom would laugh when she'd tell us how he got all red-faced and speechless before pointing at her and saying, "Are all those your kids?" Afterward, they reconnected and this time actually started dating. Then, a couple years later, my mom, having remembered him saying would never ask her again, proposed to my dad. The funniest part about all of it, though, is that it was a leap year. In an Irish tradition, during a leap year, the woman is supposed to propose to the man. They were married in March, and I was born that October. Then, years later, after doing the math, I pointed out to my mom that there's only 7 months between March and October. And man, would she get upset and embarrassed every time I brought it up. I miss her a lot. My mom passed away in 2021. We almost lost my dad a couple weeks ago, and he had a massive heart attack. But my dad has always been a freak of nature his whole life, and while he was weak for a few days, he's almost back to his old self. I can't believe it, really, because the doctors told us he probably wouldn't make it through the next few days. He had 3 blocked arteries, including the widowmaker. Before that, he'd never been in the hospital for an illness. I honestly don't know how he survived, but I'm thankful for that. Story 27. This was a yes to a proposal that was never offered and should have been a no. I was 18, joined the military and stationed in West Germany. Yes, a few years before the Berlin Wall fell. I corresponded, sent postal email back and forth with an old friend or girlfriend from junior high. We'd not really seen each other much since then. When we were dating, years before, I had said, "If I say I love you, I mean it is forever." Well, during one of my letters as a stupid 18-year-old, I happened to say it. She accepted my invitation? Proposal? I figured I had a job. I was kind of lonely over there, so we got married 6 months later when I flew home to the States, despite never proposing. Long story short, we stayed married for 7 years and had 2 kids together before she confessed that she never really loved me, and wasn't even sure if the kids were mine. She cheated on me all the way up to the night before the wedding. When I took her back to West Germany with me, she started an affair with a GI within 2 weeks. Turns out she had lots of psychological issues and was physically and mentally mistreated at home. She was just looking for the first ticket out of her house. And that bad situation, and I was the ride. Good news is I remarried and have been with the love of my life for 25 years as of September 2024. Story 28. As a woman who has said no, let me say I hated it. I had no idea. It wasn't just one guy, that it was coming when it came. As in, at no point had we progressed past going to the movies or slept together or anything when these things would happen. One guy moved out of state. It was private when he asked me, and it was so out of the blue. I really had no idea it was going to happen. I felt like such a loser. I'm not about to marry someone just because they propose. One time I was on a train ride. Met a lot of people on the train and we were exchanging numbers. One of the men called my parents to ask for permission to marry me. I'd met him on this train ride. There's nothing that remarkable about me. I did modeling. I am intelligent, but I'm pretty independent and headstrong. So not everybody's cup of tea, if that makes sense. But having someone call my parents to get permission that I'd met and known for a few hours max? So to anyone out there who has been told no, here first, let me tell you, I hope it was private. I would have said yes if we were in a large group, and said no privately afterwards so they could keep face. No one should have to suffer that type of embarrassment. Proposing to someone is huge, and you don't deserve humiliation on top of being turned down for the risk of asking. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.